So today is Tuesday, April the 15th, 2014, so Income Tax Day, easy day to remember. And I'm Vic Schoenbach, and I'm sitting here with David McCoy, who has just retired from being the controller, North Carolina controller. And maybe I could ask you to say a few words about what exactly the controller does. And you're the 5th controller in the history of the state, so
yes.
I guess you've either been in that office a very long time, or it's a fairly new office.
Well, it's the latter. Although I was the controller for 5.5 years, had a term of 7, but due to family circumstances, decided to go ahead and retire early. The controller's office is it is the little gear in state government that really keeps everything on time. The state controller serves as the chief financial officer for the state. The office processes about $50 billion a year in transactions, about 40 million transactions with a staff of about 204 folks. Now, in addition to all the state accounting, and the reporting, so by reporting we're talking about the general fund monthly reports, the financial reports, as well as the CAFR, the annual financial report that is reviewed by Wall Street in order to determine our bond rating. One of the roles of the controller, along with the treasurer and the state budget director, is to defend the state's bond rating, which, as you know, North Carolina has a AAA bond rating.
I should congratulate you, just renewed, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. So we are one of 9 states in the nation that have the AAA bond rating, and a very coveted rating, and we're very proud of our status. In addition to the accounting and reporting, we also are involved in the state payroll, the Beacon program. It's run out of the controller's office. We pay about 100,000 state employees, approximately 500 million of the 1.3 billion that's paid every month in payroll. We also have a call center where we obviously, when folks get paid and things aren't exactly right, they like to get them remedied. And so we have a staff that helps deal with those matters. We have internal controls through a program called EAGLE. And it's a very small office, consists of a staff of 4. And their responsibility is to, and they have statewide responsibility, is to help the universities, to help all the state agencies, the commissions, boards, and so forth, to perform, we'll just describe it as a gap analysis in order to determine where their risks are. And then based on that, their job, and I think it's appreciated by the state auditor, is to get in front of the auditor, to take corrective actions before the audit occurs, and therefore there are no findings. And so we have that responsibility. And then we also have a program that we developed. It's known as CJ Leaves. It's the Criminal Justice Law Enforcement Automated Data Services. Now, you will recall that Eve Carson was murdered over here in 2008, on March the 5th, 2008. When, after Eve's murder, it became widely known throughout the state, and as a matter of fact, throughout the nation, that North Carolina had failed its public. They had failed Eve in particular, but also had failed Abhijit Muhato, a Duke student, an engineering student, who was killed by, I believe he was killed by Lawrence Lovett, although it might have been DeMario.
I think it was Lawrence Lovett.
Lawrence Lovett. When the Assembly found out that, among other things, that he had not been checked on by his probation officer in over a year, and that also that Lawrence had appeared in the Wake County courtroom on March the 3rd to stand on a weapons charge. And because his records were sent to one courtroom and he appeared in the courtroom he was supposed to, but since his records weren't there, the judge continued the case, and 2 days later, he was murdered. Well, as a result of all of that, the Assembly asked our office to build a data integration system so that the 9 different criminal justice data systems that we had could share information. They all had data, and they had very good data that was serving their own unique needs, but they had that rather myopic view that a lot of folks have about it being something that they own rather than an asset of the state. So what we did was, in partnership with SAS, we built a world-class application that is now being used by 27,000 law enforcement and court officials in the state. All the federal agencies, the FBI, Secret Service, ICE, Homeland Security are all using it as well. And it provides instant information, tells an officer immediately whether or not the person that he had stopped on the side of the road at 3 o'clock at night or any time of the day has outstanding warrants, has been arrested for violence, an attack on a government official or an officer, has a history of meth use, which is a particular concern to them because the folks are so unpredictable. Tells them immediately whether or not the vehicle is stolen, also whether or not the person has a concealed carry weapons permit, all of that information made instantly available.
Wow.
Courts, likewise, the judge has that information, and so that somebody like Lawrence Lovett or Mario Atwater, when they appear on the charge, if they, the records will be there for their use, in other words. And we are very, very proud of that. Matter of fact, I think above all else, that's probably the single activity that I was involved in that I'm most proud of, that I believe has had the greatest immediate impact across the state.
Now, why would they ask the controller's office to do that? That sounds like IT.
Well, yes, but IT hasn't had a record in North Carolina of being particularly capable of being able to perform tasks on time or within budget. We know about NC-WISE being, when I was the budget director, I called the question when they were $250 million over budget. You can go through the whole alphabet of all those different programs, and you're looking right now at NC Tracks and NC Fast over at DHHS, and the miserable rollout that they've had. It's just, so in the controller's office, we have people that are very bright, and they're can-do people, and we did it. And so I think it's probably just
good decision.
Yes,
it's a good decision.
Right. So that in a nutshell is sort of the now that CJ leads, though, in the wisdom of the new governor and the General Assembly, will be transferred out of the controller's office and go over to ITS in July. And that's probably all I need to say about that. I wish them the very best.
Well, this is good, because you're leaving now. I mean, so if there is a problem with the system, it won't be on your legacy.
Well, I would...
but I hope they'll be able to keep it going.
Yes, it's very, very important to all of us. It has absolutely made our communities, our citizens, and our law enforcement personnel safer.
Well, maybe they'll be able to advocate for ITS to get the resources and leadership that it needs to keep it going.
They have resources.
Resources. Leadership.
Yes, right. Resources is not the issue.
Okay.
Capacity is another question.
Huh.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. So let me ask, one thing I want to ask you at a certain point maybe is, how is it that how did your public health training lead you to do what you're just describing? But I thought it might be interesting to back up a little bit in your career and go back to where you were before you became state controller, and back up a little bit to see the scope of your professional career.
Well, it actually starts, I think ultimately getting to the controller's office starts with AIDS and with Eddie Hatcher. When I was over here, I'm believe it was when I was here. It might have been shortly after I went to the Commission of Indian Affairs, but I believe it was when I was here. I went down to Robeson County to make a little talk, and I spoke about maternal and child health issues, just generally, nutrition, that type of thing. And also spoke about a new disease that had just been revealed, known as AIDS. And I finished that talk and came back to Raleigh, Chapel Hill. And then fast forward, I'm sitting in the staff meeting at the Commission of Indian Affairs, and it's a Monday morning, and we have the full staff meeting, so it must be the first Monday of the month. And a lady by the name of Janet Jacobs comes in and says, David, Eddie Hatcher is on the telephone and he wants to talk to you. And I said, well, go tell Eddie that I'm having a staff meeting and I'll call him back. I don't know who Eddie is.
Oh.
So she goes and returns and says, David, Mr. McCoy, the governor has landed his plane in Charlotte. Eddie has taken the Robertsonian over and is holding all of the people in there hostage, and he wants to talk to you. And so I said, well, tell Eddie I'll be right there. So I went in and talked to Eddie, and sure enough, he
By phone, this is.
by telephone. Well, it was a little bit of a funny thing. Is that so I get on the phone, and it's Timothy, his accomplice, and he says, well, Eddie will be right here. And then he says, well, we're going to have to call you back. The New York Times, or is calling. So I said, okay, fine. So, told go call executive security, get people moving. So we got things lined up. And he calls back, and sure enough says that he is holding these folks, that he has these demands, that he wants me to get these demands to the governor, and that they have automatic weapons and explosives, and that if anybody tries to rush them, that people will die. So the end of the story was that Governor Martin and Phil Kirk and the sheriff all worked, chief of police in Lumberton, they all worked together, and we had a successful resolution to it. Nobody got hurt. Eddie and Timothy, as you may recall, both were convicted and sentenced. So, but it was as a result of that I came to the attention of Governor Martin and Phil Kirk, and then Jim Lofton, the Secretary of Administration. And it wasn't too long after that they asked me to be the general counsel in the Department of Administration. And so from there, I worked until Governor Hunt came in, and they asked me to stay on, and then became the Chief Deputy Secretary of Administration. And then Governor Hunt asked me to be his Deputy Chief of Staff, and then the Secretary of Transportation. And then following that, when Governor Easley came in, he asked me to be the Budget Director, and I served in that role for 7.5 years. And then when Mr. Powell's term expired, the governor nominated me to be the controller.
Wow.
And so, long and short of it is that I owe my career to a convicted felon.
To Eddie Hatcher.
To Eddie Hatcher.
So you said AIDS and Eddie Hatcher.
Right.
What was the AIDS connection?
Well, that was this new disease that I was just talking about. And as it turns out, in quite an ironic twist, Eddie eventually died, and he died
of AIDS.
Yes.
I saw a television program about Eddie Hatcher. which talked about the takeover of the Robertsonian, and also his time in prison, and interviews with him in prison, and his experience with AIDS and so on. And it's never been repeated to my knowledge. And I think I even wrote to ask if it were possible to get a copy, and they said no. So there must have been something in it that either offended somebody, or maybe it was copyrighted material or something that was used. But I can't remember the name. It was something like The Life and Times of Eddie Hatcher or something.
I remember
It was on PBS.
yeah, a program that came out. I do remember
15 years ago or something.
Right, and presented him in the best light possible. And I thought perhaps better than he deserved in certain aspects.
So the only thing I'm sort of wondering, so what? I mean, you've got a public health degree. I know you have you have a JD also. So I realize it's not only public health, but the only connection I could think of to public health was that you said you had this gap analysis, which was designed to prevent problems before the auditors came in.
Yeah. Well, actually, I started off as I started off working very early on. Grew up very, very poor. And my mother, born on the Indian Reservation in Belcourt, North Dakota.
Oh, so not from North Carolina?
No, I'm an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians from Belcourt, North Dakota. And my mother had a 8th grade education, and like a lot of folks, poor and uneducated, looking for some way out of poverty. She was married a couple, 2 or 3 times, but I've never met my father. I don't know who he is, so you couldn't pick him out of a one-person lineup. And but as a result of those circumstances, I learned the value of work, and found, like many folks, you know, there were certain occupations that you could find your way into if you didn't have networks. You know, not being associated with the C-sector crowd.
The what sector crowd?
Corporate.
Corporate sector, okay.
So that, so I didn't have anybody to, you know, pull me up. I got a degree in education and became a public school teacher. And
was this in Minnesota still?
No, this was in Georgia.
In Georgia.
So I got my undergraduate degree in social science education at Georgia. Taught the academically gifted and talented, and then while I was doing that, I also got a master's in educational psychology, and then decided in a sort of not the best thought out plan, a fellow that I had grown up in his household, in his family, they had taken me in. He and I decided we'd go into business together, and but neither one of us understood the notion of capital. We just understood there was a success outcome waiting for us. All we had to do was desire it, and, you know, start trying to do something. And, well, it didn't work out, and so I started looking for other alternatives, and contacted Elaine Walbrook, who was the director of the American Indians program at UCal Berkeley. And she said, well, I'd be glad to have you come out here. She said, but you know, there's a school right up there in Chapel Hill. That's a very fine school, and I would encourage you to contact them if you don't want to come all the way back to the West Coast. So I did. I contacted Bill Small and Ron Oxendine, and filed for admission to the Department of then Health Education, and was admitted.
What year would that have been?
1980.
1980, uh-huh.
And so came in, and 2 years later, graduated. But in the course of that 2 years, now there were some pretty significant influences on my life. Folks like Guy Stewart and John Hatch and Leonard Dawson. John, in particular, John and Margaret Pollard. John was doing an awful lot of work, as you may recall, with the before we had before they were seen in Walmart and out in public. We had a significant population of hidden immigrants in the state, and the migrant.
I knew about that, actually.
Well, the Newton Grove Migrant Health Center.
I do remember that, yeah.
Right, they provided an awful lot of services, and John did a lot of work with them, and I was fortunate enough to travel with him on a couple of occasions, and with Margaret on a couple more. And what really became apparent to me through that, and then also I should also mention Ken Wing, who was down in health administration and also a professor over at the law school. But what became very apparent to me at that time was that you can be very well intended and want to promote social change. But unlike Mao, who said that power comes from the end of a barrel of a gun, in America, power comes from the end of a barrel of a pen. It is the word that will change outcomes. And so I decided that I needed to go to law school if I was going to be a change agent. And that's what I did. And then when I finished finished law school, we graduated on Mother's Day, and the next day I started over here as the director of the Masters in Public Health Program for American Indians.
In health ed, or
It was
school-wide?
school-wide, yes. It was. We had there were 4 programs across the country. One was in Hawaii for native Hawaiians. One was at UCal Berkeley, Elaine Walbrook. One was at Oklahoma, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. And then the program that we had here.
So this was a multi-department or a cross-department MPH for American Indians?
It was, yes. And what the primary focus was to identify capable young American Indians and to assist them in getting into a school of public health, principally in one of those 4 institutions. And I did, while I was working here, there were students that I helped get into UCal Berkeley, and we had shared experiences where we, just as what occurred with Elaine saying to me I needed to come talk to Bill. So our focus was primarily on not so much on developing a curriculum as it was on trying to identify and assist students into applying for and being admitted into these programs.
So they applied to a regular department and got their degree in a regular department.
Right.
So you mentioned Ron Oxendine.
Mm-hmm.
Was he in a comparable position before you took
Yes.
the one here?
He was in that role when I made first contact. Ron left, and so while I was here, I helped as a graduate student. I helped Bill out downstairs, and then when I was in law school, likewise, continued to assist. Not so much the first year, but second and third year.
Law school has that reputation.
Well, yes, that's right. And what actually too, what also happened was that a fellow by the name of Richard Yogi Crow, who was from Cherokee, came over while I was in law school my first year, and very, very unfortunately, on his way driving back home to Cherokee, had an automobile accident and was killed. And so Bill once again was in a lurch, and that's what led to me coming over and helping during my second and third year. Second and part of the third. They hired another fellow as I was approaching the end of program, and it was very apparent that I wasn't going to be doing that, but as it turned out, I was. As I say, we graduated on Mother's Day and then came over and started as the director, and then shortly thereafter, I think it was Leonard Dawson led the effort to have me, for me to obtain an appointment as a clinical assistant professor in health education. And appointment I held until I left, and then became an adjunct.
Now, did you also get a degree in health policy or health administration, I guess it was
Mm-hmm.
called? No, I must have gotten that mixed up somehow.
No, I like administration, but
But you did it without the
Yeah.
handicap of a degree in it.
that's right. Yeah. So and then I was here, and I was really having it was pretty good life. When you think back about it, it's a lot of very interesting folks coming, very it's transitory. So bright people coming, bright people leaving, and but a fellow by the name of Bruce Jones, who was director of Commission of Indian Affairs, I was making the rounds, going to National Congress of American Indian meetings and other places like that, speaking. Bruce heard me, and he wanted me to come be his deputy was retiring, and he wanted me to come be the deputy of the Commission of Indian Affairs, and he would not let up. So, and he unashamedly guilt-tripped him, just until I finally yielded and said, okay, I'll go. And as it turns out, it was, I could have probably had a very nice life, but professional career working here, it would have led to other things, I'm sure. Or the path that I wound up taking certainly was a very interesting and challenging career.
So you were deputy commissioner of Indian Affairs,
Mhm.
and then you became commissioner.
Well, then I became the general counsel.
Oh, the general counsel.
Right. So then that's when I started using my law degree,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that until that's after that. That's when I started getting tracked into the leadership roles, executive roles. So in one form or another, since for about 25 years, I've been, as my good friend Jim Graham used to say, I ascended into the role of being the oldest rat in the barn.
He was commissioner of agriculture, as I
Yes,
remember.
that's right. And
Colorful phrase.
when I look back on it, it is having worked for so many different governors and across party lines, that is not a very common experience, and there is no one working in except Spiros Flavis. I believe he's the only one, and he is currently one of the deputies in administration.
And his name was?
Spiros Flavis.
Spiros Flavis.
And he was director of state construction. And a fellow by the name of James Rhodes, when I was the general counsel at that time, and Spiros was the director of state construction. James Rhodes, who was the chief deputy, said to Spiros, I want you to come, or he was the assistant, over at state. I want you to be the director of state construction. And Spiros said, no, I don't want to do that, because that's an exempt role, and I have a family, I don't want to take that risk. And kind of like being on soft money over here.
Mm-hmm.
And James said to him, well, what makes you think that you're safe if you don't take the job? And that's sort of the role that I think he and I both got into. There was never an assurance that we weren't employees' hourly labor. We were, minute, second labor. And I've seen people who, it happens. And so.
Because they're political appointments, essentially.
Yes, right. And absolute total discretion. No rights, no challenges.
Well, you're clearly a very remarkable and exceptional person. You were unanimously confirmed for the state controller by the General Assembly, is that?
Well, that's right. All present. I think there were a couple who were absent that day.
Has the General Assembly ever done anything unanimous other than
Not
that?
recently.
Not recently.
Right. Yeah. No, not recently.
Now, admittedly, it was in 2008, and I guess it was a little easier in those days, maybe, than it is now. But it's still quite an achievement, I think, quite a recognition.
Yeah, I think there was, yes, and I've worked hard to develop a reputation of being a person that who keeps his word, honors his obligation and his oaths, and I think that served me well.
Well, trust is really critical for interaction, for cooperative interaction and building society. And yet deception is such an inherent part of human nature. I imagine you've seen your share of deception, well, not your share of it, but you've seen ample aspects of deception. How is it that you were able to succeed in a political world without engaging in deception, when nowadays that seems to be such an essential part, whether it's managing...
Isn't it a shame? Because
Yeah.
because I'm a Jeffersonian, I think at heart. While it is true, I believe in limited government. I also believe, as Jefferson did, that the role of government is to do that we cannot individually do. So collectively, we need to bond together in order to meet our common needs. That's the role of public health.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Jefferson's other mandates that I think everybody ought to subscribe to, whether they're in politics or in any walk of life in our society, is that the art of government consists in the art of honesty. Above all else, we should be honest. And yet, you are right, and I think part of about the fact that we have so many people who are interested in media spin and 30-second little snippets. The public's confidence in our government in North Carolina, this latest poll on topic said that 27% of our population had confidence in our government. Now, when I look at the events of in Egypt, for example, and other parts of the world, when the population loses confidence in its government, there will be a reaction. And so when I hear things like the governor standing up and telling the entire nation that North Carolina's government is broken, it concerns me deeply. Now, when we started this conversation, we started talking about what the role of the Comptroller's Office was. And remember, we said that part of that was to defend the state's bond rating. People who make objective determinations of whether or not a government is broken or not broken are the bond rating houses. Moody's, Fitch's, and Standard & Poor's. And yet they have consistently said that North Carolina's government, not only is it not broken, but it is operating the management decisions, the ability. Now what they want to know is, are you capable of managing within resources, and are you executing according to plan? And they have said, all three of them independently, they don't get together and say, well, it's not like Dancing with the Stars, you know. They independently do their evaluation and independently report their findings. And they have said consistently that North Carolina's government is not broken. Now, I do think that there are things, for example, over at DHHS, there has been a budgeting problem. There are a lot of highly capable people working at DHHS, and they're working very hard trying to do the right thing in the right way. The shortfall, which will affect everybody again this year. Now, there's going to be another Medicaid shortfall, and it's going to be, I've heard some people say, well, it's only going to be $120 million. I hope it is only $120 million. I wouldn't take that number myself. So you're going to have that, and on top of that, you know, since 2009, they have been wrong to the tune of nearly $2 billion. $2 billion. So there is something wrong over there. And but it is not something that is central to the core of state government. It is a budgeting issue and a management issue at DHHS. Now, what they keep doing is, for example, they, instead of perhaps saying, well, maybe we need to take a look at who's been making these assumptions, and maybe we need to get some new people in here and look at those assumptions. They didn't do that. They gave the person who was making those assumptions a pay raise. Well, you can see why the public might say, well, now that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. He's been missing it all along. He's continuing to miss it, and the answer is you're going to give him a pay raise along with these two 24-year-olds that you gave the $85,000 salaries to, while teachers, you won't give them a dime. So, yeah, there are parts of our government that aren't working the way that common sense might suggest that they should operate. But our government is not broken by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I wouldn't want to dare them. I remember years ago, one of the parties was saying that government can't do anything. And then they proceeded to demonstrate it when they got elected.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, that is and that is it is actually the beauty of America truly is that our movement away from a monarchy and into this great experiment where we as individuals have a voice. Now, not all of us take that responsibility as seriously as we should, but we do get to elect the people who act as our voice. And so when we have folks who are in office and are doing things that we bemoan now, the answer is not to simply state our frustration, but rather to encourage others to exercise their civic responsibility and get out and vote. And along with that, I should say, it's not just enough to vote to, it is also to be supportive of the civil servants who promote a civil society. Those folks, the school teachers, you know, I had to attend several funerals for people who were killed in the line of duty over in the Department of Transportation. I had one gentleman who gave his life, literally gave his life so that a lady could be saved when he jumped into a swollen creek and pulled her to safety, and then he perished. There are some very, very fine state employees, and so it just troubles me that we paint with such a broad brush and cast aspersions that aren't merited, aren't very well thought out. They're just 30-second spin bullets in order to encourage people to have a reaction.
Mm-hmm. So, let me just see how we are in the video, and then I wanted to switch to. So, we could go on about politics and government for a long time, but I wanted to go back to your early life, if I can. You said you were born in Minnesota?
No, I was born in Tacoma, Washington.
Tacoma, Washington, okay.
Right, yes. My mother was born in Belcourt, North Dakota.
Okay,
Devil's Lake, North Dakota.
okay,
And is a member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indian.
okay. But you were in, but she was in Washington when you were born?
Yes, my family, extended family, moved from the reservation out to Tacoma, and that's where the stepfather that I had for the longest amount of time, I guess that's where she met him. And but he was military. He was a patriot, but he suffered like a lot of. What's becoming a revelation to me now with all of the discussion about PTSD is that he clearly suffered from PTSD. He was in Korea when he was 17 years old at the 38th parallel, was expert infantry, had the expert infantry badge, was a person who was part of the Army SEALs. They had a team that they developed at that time, was later disbanded. It ultimately became the, I don't know that there was a flow between what they became, but he became a member of the 7th Special Forces. He was in intelligence and also became a pilot. And so because of his role in intelligence and the other work that he was doing in defense of the country, we were often positioned in, we lived in places like Leipzig, Germany, which was a glider training post, and we lived in Fort Rucker, Alabama, when Cuba was getting hot, and we were building up for Vietnam, and then we lived out in Presidio in San Francisco. Not such bad duty, or Monterey, it wasn't so bad either. And as a result of that, though, you know, I did get to see. I lived in Governor George Wallace's Alabama in the 5th grade, 6th grade, and in Governor Brown, Jerry Brown's daddy's California, and then, but also Lester Maddox's and Jimmy Carter's Georgia, and so I got to see all of that. We wound up graduating from high school out in California.
California. And so it was your having lived in Georgia that led you to go to Georgia for your college degree.
Right.
And what, that was at University of Georgia?
Georgia in Athens.
In Athens.
And that's where I met my wife. Bussing tables at Charlie Williams Pinecrest Lodge.
And where is she from?
She was originally from, born in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. But her father was a professor at UGA. He was the assistant superintendent at Pine Bluff. And then came to the Department of Education at Georgia. And then she, matter of fact, she attended the same high school that Eve Carson attended.
And you said that her father went on to become the president of the Association of Southern Colleges and Universities.
Yes.
Terrific accomplishment.
Yes, quite a gentleman.
So, do you have any thoughts about the class that we'll be going to is on health disparities and health equity, including the societal, social determinants and so on. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about, from your own personal experience, when you came to public health, were you motivated partly by concerns about American Indian health specifically, or the more general question of public health?
I think I was more focused on American Indians and the alcoholism and suicide, things that most folks who are Indians have had to deal with. And so mental health and those types of things. And you know, I was pretty naive. Although I had traveled all around the world, and I had certainly had a number of work experiences, but again, just like we were talking about the C sector, you know, a person who operates and lives at the bottom doesn't know, he's never seen the top. So, you know, how do you know how to prepare yourself for that opportunity? You know, heck, I didn't know when you got engaged you were supposed to give them ring. I didn't know that. I mean, but that was the world that I grew up in. And
if it's any consolation, I didn't get my wife a ring either.
Yeah. It was it was just you know, the not knowing appropriate societal protocols, those types of things. And so my panorama, you know, my mother came from a family of 12, and so my perspective on the world was colored to a great degree by my interactions with my uncles and my aunt. I had an aunt who had epilepsy, and I had my grandmother, my mother, all my aunts, and now my sister, myself. We all have diabetes, you know, so it's just, but it's one of those things. Now, if you would, whether I come to the School of Public Health and had all these experiences or not, I could tell you that people in the Indian community have problems with sugar. And should we do something about it? You bet.
But you applied to health education.
Mm-hmm.
So were you thinking that solutions might lie through education or community organizing? Because of course Guy Stewart was.
Yeah, no, that was one of the great. I don't. Maybe epiphany is too strong a word, but it's very much along those lines that because when I came with the teacher's perspective that what I needed to do was to get some materials, and I could go out and I could talk to people and I could convince them that it's in their best interest to go ahead and stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
But as Guy would tell you, no, that's you can tell them that they need to stop smoking, but that's not going to necessarily make them stop smoking.
He would know, or would have known.
Yes, right. And it really was, you know, John Hatch's. While I was here, I worked with John Hatch and Jeannie Ng. We co-taught a course for the 2 years that I was a student, and it was on the delivery of health care to minority populations. Had an African American experience.